Are you considering using a custom ISO? Well, if so, you've clicked on the right video, because in today's video I'm going to compare Atlas OS, Ghost Spectre and Windows X-Lite. So sit down, strap in, let's go. Right guys, that's going to bring us to our first custom ISO, Atlas OS. So Atlas OS has got some real strengths and it also has some real drawbacks, unfortunately. So let me start off with the drawbacks. Installing Atlas OS is such a pain in the ass. It's not incredibly difficult, it just takes quite a long time. I've actually done this, comparing my custom ISOs. This is the first custom ISO I'm comparing. And this whole process of installing, running the Ameliorate Wizard or AME Wizard, and then also doing my benchmarks has taken in excess of 5 hours. So that's not a strength. But looking at the strengths, it is very smooth. Once you run the playbook via the AME Wizard, it does automate some Windows service or automate Windows settings for you. There was very little that I actually had to do in Windows settings. Pretty much optimize all my system settings, devices. When you get to, so it optimized all these settings over here. In terms of the mouse, automatically switched off enhanced pointer precision, which is quite cool. Apps, it's organized the startup menu for me, as well as sorry man, I'm getting a bit sidetracked here, as well as the start menu. And then furthermore, in terms of privacy, okay, look, I always leave on camera and microphone, but barring one or two settings, it optimized the privacy settings, which is very cool. And then what else was there? Quite cool is I always switch off Spectre and Meltdown via regedit, but this it automatically switched off Spectre and Meltdown, so I didn't even have to go ahead and do it. It was just off from the start, which is very, very cool. But like I said, it takes it forever to install compared to other custom ISOs, so that wasn't too much fun. But other than that, it looks very clean, it's very minimalist, and once you clean up the start menu, it looks very nice. And the raw performance isn't bad. Like towards the end of this video, once I've compared all three custom ISOs, I will compare the stats of Atlas OS versus Ghost Spectre versus Windows X-Lite, and then also versus my own Windows 10 custom or optimized settings. But before I get to the settings of Atlas OS, let me just show you. So obviously, if I had to open up Task Manager and show you this, everything's skewed, unfortunately, because of OBS Studio. So I just took a screenshot. After I installed everything, background processes was 41, Windows processes was 31, and then CPU obviously was using 1%, and then memory. Look, this has gone up a little bit because I've got 24 gigs of RAM, so the more RAM you have, the more latent RAM is going to be used. But yeah, so it's very bare bones. It's a very smooth operating system. If you like simplicity, this definitely is for you. But let's get to those results. So all my games were tested at medium settings, with the exception of the newer games. The newer games are quite heavy for my GTX 1650 mobile. So Ratchet & Clank was on a mixture of lowest and low settings. Remnant is on low settings, and I use not FSR2, I'm actually using XES on balanced. Resident Evil 4 Remake is on a mixture of medium, high and low, and then Dead Island is on medium, and Hogwarts Legacy is also on medium. But where FSR 2.0 or 2.1 was available, I used the quality setting. Obviously I mentioned Remnant, I use XES because it actually just looks better with XES. And then as you notice here, it's very impractical to test online multiplayer games because I actually have to purchase those games. I don't play online games, so I'm not going to purchase games just for benchmarks. So unfortunately, all the games that are benchmarked here are single player games, the best. And then lastly, obviously, if you on a I'm using a GTX 1650 mobile to benchmark the games, the average FPS, blah 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 blah. If you're on an RTX card, your results may vary, but I mean that goes without saying. And then lastly, I did all my benchmarks on the latest driver, 536.99. So guys, for Atlas OS, pretty solid performance. When I add up all the average FPSs over 13 games, my total FPS was 928 divided by 13. So my average FPS per game on Atlas OS is 71.38. And then I do the same thing for the 1% lows, add up all the 1% lows, and then over 13 games, my total 1% lows was 663 divided by 13. So my average 1% low per game is 51. And then when I divide the 1% lows by the average FPS, the stability on Atlas OS using the settings that I have, when I divide the 1% lows by the average FPS, the stability is 71.45%, which is a pretty solid result if you ask me. But to get better context, you're just gonna have to watch the whole video, and then at the end of the video, as mentioned earlier, I'll be comparing Atlas OS versus Spectre versus Windows X-Lite. And we'll get to that. And that's going to bring us to our second custom ISO, Spectre 10 Superlite. I will put a link to where you can download this in the description of the video, as well as for Atlas OS. I negated to say it earlier. First and foremost, the one thing I very much like about this custom ISO is it's quite convenient to install. Unlike Atlas OS, where it takes a goddamn age, Spectre, you pretty much create the ISO, stick it in, and load your ISO, and then after doing a couple of optimizations, you're good to go. I like the look of it. It feels nice and smooth. It's got a very gamery vibe. You got the Ghost toolbox. For those of you that don't really install Windows all that often, this is like a checklist, so to speak. So it's got all the little things that you need to set up Windows and all the little programs that just make your setup a lot more convenient. I didn't use that. So I obviously set up Windows quite often, so I've got my own little checklist that I do and my own little optimizations. Just a quick thing, I've got a Windows 10 Home license on my laptop. So this custom ISO is in Windows 10 Pro, so I couldn't adjust the start menu, but I mean, that's not a massive concern. It's just I can't get rid of the recently added. In terms of the settings I had to do in the background, a little bit more than what I had to do with Atlas OS, but then again, it took a lot quicker to install this custom ISO, so it's a little bit of give and take. Before I get to the results, I'll just show you what, after I've done all my optimizations, what the system looks like. In terms of background processors, we're sitting at 41. And then Windows processors, I got it to 36. The CPU, but I mean, it's at 2%, but I mean, it jumps up to about 3 or 4 every now and then, just like any other situation. And then in terms of memory, I do have 24 gigs of memory, so by default my memory is going to look a little bit higher. If you got 8 gigs, it's probably going to be sitting close to the 1.1 gig margin. If you got 16 gigs, it's probably going to be about 1.7, 1.8. But to keep this video nice and short, let me just get to those results. So all my games are tested at medium settings, except for the newer titles such as Ratchet & Clank, Remnant, Hogwarts Legacy, and Resident Evil 4 and Dead Island 2. Ratchet & Clank is at low, Remnant 2 is at low, and I don't use FSR, I actually use XES to benchmark. And Hogwarts Legacy medium, mixture of high, medium and low for Resident Evil 4, and Dead Island is at medium. Everything else is at medium. Where FSR 2.0 or 2.1 is available, I used the quality setting. And guys, as I always mention, these are all single player games. I have to purchase online multiplayer games to get games with benchmarks, or else the results are all over the place. It's very marginal error. It's not accurate. So you're stuck with single player benchmarks for me for the time being. And then obviously I test on a GTX 1650 laptop. Your results may vary if you're on an RTX platform. But then again, if you've got an RTX card, I doubt that you're going to be using custom ISOs. And then lastly, I am using the latest NVIDIA driver 536.99 just to keep the comparison apples to apples. So guys, over the 13 games, I added up all the average FPSs, and I actually got the highest average FPS so far using Ghost Spectre. So when I divide 933 by 13, it gives me 71.77 average FPS per game. But obviously your stability and your performance isn't measured by the average FPS. It's actually by 1% lows divided by average FPS. So I add up all the 1% lows, and then over 13 games, my 1% lows were 662. Not a terrible result, but not the best. So when I divide the 1% lows by 13, my average 1% low is 50.92. So when I divide the 1% lows by the average FPS, the stability using these games, doing this benchmark on this custom ISO with Ghost Spectre, making a meal of this, sorry, the stability is a little bit lower on this. This is 70.95%. So guys, not a terrible ISO, just it's convenient to set up, it looks pretty, but unfortunately it doesn't give you the best performance. With this one, you might as well just stick to Windows and just optimize Windows. I would recommend Atlas OS above this custom ISO, but I'm not done with these benchmarks just yet. Now I'm going to do Windows X-Lite 10 Optimum version 2. So stick around for that one. And finally, that brings us to our last custom ISO today, Windows X-Lite 10 Optimum version 2. For those of you that have watched my original video on this custom ISO, you know that this is my favorite custom ISO, primarily for the reason that it's incredibly easy to install. It's incredibly light. Let me just open a File Explorer. So with virtual memory, which is 8 gigabytes, and then all my programs installed, it's only using 29.8 gigabytes. So it's tiny. And then you can see File Explorer, instead of having a Windows 10 interface, it's got a Windows 11 interface, so that's pretty cool. And then furthermore, in terms of the system, once you have everything set up, background processors are occupying 33, so that's actually the lowest so far. Windows processor is 34, so it's not the lowest, but it is pretty low. And then in terms of CPU, you can see it's only using 69 processors, so a little bit lower than the previous ISO. And then the RAM usage is also a little bit lower. I don't exactly know why, but for some reason I could get this one lower than other ones, so that's always cool. Yeah, a lot of the tweaks that I do are already built into this custom ISO. There are a couple of things I need to do to it via Windows settings, but it's not a lot. There was maybe 1 or 2 settings in privacy that I had to do, but other than that, a lot of the system, once you have it installed, Windows settings is optimized mostly. A thing I also quite like, and I mentioned this in my original video, is the fact that WinError Tweaker is baked into the system already. I love WinError Tweaker. And then also, just for a note of convenience, I didn't have to tweak anything in the regedit, because system in Markdown was disabled by default. So very much like that. But this video has dragged on long enough. Let's get to those results. So Windows X-Lite, all my games are tested at medium settings, except for the newer, heavier titles, such as Ratchet & Clank. That's on a mixture of low and lowest. Remnant 2 is on low settings preset with XES set to balanced. Hogwarts Legacy is on medium. Resident Evil 4 Remake is on mixture of medium, high and low. And then also Dead Island 2 is just stock standard on medium. And then where FSR 2.0 or 2.1 was available, I used the quality setting. Not going to go through this whole rigmarole again. As you can see, I'm testing single player games. I am testing on a GTX 1650 laptop, not RTX. So your results may vary if you're using newer hardware or RTX card. But then again, I doubt that you'll be using a custom ISO if you've got new funky hardcore equipment. And then lastly, I'm on the latest NVIDIA driver 536.99. So guys, when I add up all my average FPSs over 13 games, my total comes to 930 divided by 13. So my average FPS per game is 71.54. So not the highest, but not the lowest. So the average FPS is pretty stock standard. But where this ISO is very nice is the fact that once I add up all the 1% lows, I get to a total 1% low of 668. I think for the custom ISOs, that's actually my highest. So, and then once I divide that by 13, my average 1% low per game is 51.38. So you can see, in terms of the custom ISOs, this is definitely the most stable one. And in fact, we'll probably see later, because I've seen 71.82% stability. It's probably the most stable out of the custom ISOs, and then also my Windows optimized. But we'll get to those results in a second. So guys, if you want my advice, absolutely, if you're on Windows 10 and you're wanting to try custom ISO, I love Windows 10 Optimum version 2. It looks good, it's got a tiny little footprint, and it just works. But anyway, let's get to that conclusion. Right, so what you've all been waiting for, the conclusion, when I compare all the custom ISOs against my Windows 10 optimized. So I'm not going to go through the whole rigmarole. You've already sat with me through the entire video. I'll just compare the stats. So for Windows or for Atlas OS, the stability was 71.45%, and the 1% lows were 51. The average FPS was 71.38. Not bad, but it's the second worst custom ISO out of the out of the three I tested. Go Spectre Superlite. Yet again, you can see the average 1% lows are a little bit worse than Atlas OS, and then the stability is 70.95%. So not a hell of a lot in it, but Atlas OS so far is in the lead in terms of the custom ISOs. And then the last custom ISO I tested, Windows X-Lite 10 Optimum version 2. You can see the average 1% lows are 51.38. So not majorly like outpacing the others, but it definitely is outpacing the others. It's got the best 1% lows and also the best average FPS. So in terms of stability, it's 71.82%. So in terms of custom ISOs, out of the three I tested and custom ISOs in general for Windows 10, I highly recommend Windows X-Lite 10 Optimum version 2. It's a joy to install. A lot of the optimizations are already baked into the operating system, and as you can see, the performance is rock solid. I did release a full Windows optimization video the other day. I'll link that in the description of this video. But as you can see, my go-to at the moment, I know people absolutely love custom ISOs, but I love optimizing Windows. So as you can see, Windows 10 optimized, it's just a stock standard install of Windows 10. And then with my optimizations that I've applied across all these, in terms of the average FPS, it's got the best average FPS, and it's also got slightly the best 1% lows. So if you just want to optimize Windows and you don't want to try custom ISOs, I will link in the description my optimization video. And as you can see, it's got the second best stability, and the best stability goes to Windows X-Lite 10 Optimum. So guys, if you want to optimize Windows, I'll link my video in the description. But if you want my advice, the best custom ISO, especially when it comes to Windows 10, is hands down Windows X-Lite 10 Optimum version 2. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to smash that like button. If you have any questions, please hit me up in the comment section. And as always guys, if you're still watching and you haven't subscribed as of yet, now's the time to do so. Have a fantastic evening. It's people like you. Cheers.